Okay, so last time we had been talking about, let me open everything up. Yeah, we're going to definitely do nitrous today. LOL, we're going to talk about nitrous today. So last time we'd left off just like starting, or we'd gotten part of the way through talking about ketamine. So just to kind of reiterate what we've been over so far, ketamine is an NMDA receptor antagonist, right? That means that it is preventing glutamate from doing its job as effectively. And glutamate is the connective neurotransmitter. It facilitates communication between your brain and your body. And again, this is like a hallmark of, sorry if I'm a little distracted, there's like an orchestra coming into my house right now because I have a quartet living in my house and everyone's here and they're about to start playing. Yeah, we'll talk about nitrous in a minute, so don't worry about that. So just diving back into ketamine, again, it's powder, you snort it, lasts 45 to 60 minutes approximately. Now, there are a lot of kind of like conflicting studies coming out about ketamine right now. And this is an area where it might be really interesting to do your own research and look into historically what has been published regarding ketamine and its health and safety, as opposed to what's been published in the last 2 or 3 years when the mainstream media and the mainstream pharmaceutical industry has suddenly become extremely interested in ketamine. So you might notice that there is a pretty distinct change in terminology in a lot of these scientific journals. There's a change in the way that it's referred to. So previously, for instance, many of the journals released about ketamine had been largely focused on ketamine as a problematic drug of abuse and talking about all of the different ways that this is reflected in society and how it was like a really, really big bad deal and whatever. And now all of a sudden it's extremely popular for antidepressant effects and is getting patented and produced by Johnson and Johnson as Spravato and all that shit. So interesting kind of like personal endeavor to take on is to look at these things. So when we talk about ketamine bladder syndrome, this is definitely real. This is like, there's no question. I've actually known quite a few people that have experienced ketamine bladder syndrome, several of whom have been either in like themselves or had friends who have had to have their bladders like removed or otherwise surgically altered. So this is a very real effect to pay attention to. And in fact, we've seen that even in people that use ketamine as infrequently as once a month, for a consistent long-term period of time, there is some degree of prevalence of bladder symptoms. And that usually comes in the form of incontinence, like you're not able to hold your pee in, or an urgency of peeing, or burning when you're peeing, or lower abdominal pain or kidney pain. And it's not just your bladder, it's your whole urinary tract that's affected by both ketamine and PCP and other kind of classical dissociatives, and probably other research chemical dissociatives as well. Please mute yourself if you are not muted. It's like my favorite thing to say. I just say it for fun now. So this is like a really major issue that we're currently parsing because previously we've been using ketamine consistently in medicine forever, right? For like 50 years, which is a long time. And we haven't really seen like a major prevalence of this effect until the last decade or so. And I believe that the first incident of this was kind of reported around 2007 in Hong Kong because ketamine is a major recreational substance in many regions of Asia. So this is a newer health incident. And the reason that it's just entering our radar right now, or like recently, is because previously ketamine hasn't really been used at this quantity and frequency. So, what has been an extremely well tolerated dose of ketamine medically on a kind of occasional basis with like zero toxicity reported can be a completely different story if you're doing it frequently, like multiple times a month at raves or in large quantities or whatever. So, if you are a person that uses ketamine, my personal recommendation is to not use it more than once every 2 months to be safe at this point in time. And for many of you that are dissociative lovers, you'll be like, boo. And I get it. But like, until we know more about the limits of ketamine use and your bladder and toxicity, I highly advise staying on the safe side here because you really do not want to have irreversible bladder damage from this. Yeah, keep that in mind. Generally, how we think that this might work, and this is kind of just like a preliminary idea. There are many ways that it could induce toxicity. One of them is causing bladder fibrosis, which basically means that your bladder gets all thick and stringy and shit. And basically, the idea generally that we have is that ketamine gets into your urine, which goes through it goes through your kidneys, right? And it's a big crystalline structure. It's kind of not great for your kidneys. And then it goes into your urine, which is then held in your bladder. And then from there, the current like light idea maybe is that possibly ketamine interacts with the epithelial lining of your bladder, which is like the protective inner lining of it, and damages those cells, which allows toxins from your urine to kind of leak into your bladder and get into your bloodstream and cause bladder shrinkage and wall thickening. And that hurts. It's like a little shrinky, shrivelly cantaloupe inside of you, and that's gross and sad. But you're not gross and sad if that happened to you. It's just a side effect of drugs. You are no lesser of a person. So that's just a really important thing to keep in mind and to pay attention to. If you have any kind of lower back pain during or after using ketamine, if you feel like you're going to the bathroom more frequently, or if it's more urgent and you're someone that uses K, like you should pay attention to these things and talk to your doctor about getting some tests run if need be. Cognition issues, we'll come back to in a minute, so I'm going to kind of ignore that. And then liver toxicity or hepatotoxicity is another thing that is like not super substantiated at this point. Like, again, we're just starting to use ketamine at these like high dose frequent intervals. This is a new application of this drug. So, I mean, ravers have been doing it forever, but like ketamine bladder cystitis probably wasn't that prevalent because K has really exploded in popularity since the early 2000s. So in terms of liver toxicity, some things that we might be seeing are like people that have like liver toxicity was demonstrated in one treatment in which like a couple of patients or several patients had like 100-hour long ketamine infusion, and then another one after 16 days, and they had like really high elevations of liver enzymes or something like that. And so that's like, we don't know how applicable that is and what it actually means. But again, if you're someone that uses drugs on a regular basis, getting your major organs checked on a regular basis is a really, really good idea. Can you even call it a line at that point? So in terms of cognition, I kind of share this slide lightly because it's not, I don't really trust this information that much. So take this with a grain of salt, okay? There have been some studies showing that if you are like, this is kind of like pulling from generalized data, that if you're someone that is using ketamine, heavy consumption for most days out of the month, or injecting it daily for half a year or more, then you might be at risk of some kind of like neuronal damage. And this would likely happen in the realm of the hippocampus, like your memory regions of your brain. So any kind of neuronal or neural damage from ketamine use is probably centered in the realm of memory and learning and like recognition and stuff like that, which makes sense because that's what this class of drugs interrupts, is memory and learning. Although that's like interesting in an applicable therapeutic sense. Again, remember, we're unlearning things. That's the whole point of this antidepressant effect, is that we are unlearning maladaptive and possibly harmful or damaging mental pathways and behavioral pathways. So it's a double-edged sword. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to get any kind of brain damage if you're doing ketamine unless you're doing it on like a super frequent basis. And again, this really poses the question of like, okay, with any other substance that you're doing at this frequency and regularity, will you be less prone to some kind of deleterious effect? And, you know, I've known a lot of people that have done acid like every day for years. And I can't believe I just said I've known a lot of people that have done acid every day for years, but I have. And generally, they're pretty well-adjusted individuals who are a little weird. So it kind of is like, I personally would say that it's a good idea to space your use out as much as possible with ketamine and with other substances as well. So let's go back to the history of ketamine. In 1964, we discovered ketamine. It was synthesized, and everyone in the medical industry was like, whoa, this is cool. So, of course, they decided to test it out on prisoners because that's what America does. So we went in and anesthetized vulnerable populations in prisons, and prisoners were like, this is kind of dank, which I have a lot of commentary on. But we'd previously been using PCP as a significant anesthetic in human medicine. And it wasn't until ketamine came around that we were like, oh, we can swap this out, because there was a really high rate of people coming out of surgery after being sedated partly with PCP in a psychotic episode, or just like having some kind of acute psychosis or loss of touch with reality or agitation that took in some days, like in some cases, a couple days to go away. So that was a problem. And they decided to incorporate PCP in, and then, or I'm sorry, ketamine in, and then they started using it in Vietnam to treat soldiers because they were like, oh, this is dank, because ketamine does not cause respiratory depression in the same way that opioids do, which is really good for traumatic injuries, right? And also K is just a really well-tolerated substance that is less likely to induce compulsive behavior than opioids, maybe. And we'll come back to that in a minute because that's a big question. The question is, doesn't the tolerance spike dramatically? Yeah, I mean, like you do get tolerance spikes. I have met people that have done 8 grams to 12 grams of ketamine every single day. And that's a huge expenditure. That's really a massive quantity of money because usually K goes for between $70 and $100 per gram on the streets, depending on where you are in the country and how unlucky you are. Right now, I would say that $100 is like approximate for many areas of the country because we're in a ketamine drought.
What about acid though? If you're taking acid every day, then it stops working, right? Like you can't trip 2 days in a row.
Yeah, that's really like that is true. And that's part of why I think people can do something like that, is taking acid every day. Or I'm sure that like it's like most days and they say, oh yeah, I take it every day. You know, realistically speaking, that's what's happening, is that there are occasional breaks. But your tolerance really does go up pretty quickly for LSD. Like you can trip 2 or probably even 3 days in a row successfully, and after that, you're shit out of luck. So it's like, I would imagine that there's some kind of perceived benefit for the people that do that because it is like a constant activation or a constant agonism of serotonin receptors, like, I guess. Seeing 130 or 140 per G over here. Woo! Holy shit. That's crazy. Wow. 50% of my Burning Man stress is planning out how to space the trips. Don't even get me started on the E4's trip stress. Again, like I said, if you guys are watching this on YouTube and not actually here right now, you are missing out on this chat. Right, so ketamine is very, very popular right now in a lot of countries as a recreational drug, particularly various regions in Asia. China has a huge K culture, but it's kind of underground. Now there's also like a massive culture around ketamine in the UK, to the point where songs like this.
Okay, kids, we'd like to thank you for listening. Here's a little warning to you all. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's all go to a ketamine party. Let's all go to a ketamine party.
You know, it's just little cultural tidbits like this. For instance, in the 60s, the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers was a zine that was put out that included kind of like plays on this hilarious anti-drug campaign. You guys have seen that possibly. This is your brain, this is drugs, this is your brain on drugs. And it's like a video of a guy cracking an egg into a frying pan. Any questions? And this was a zine that was put out that really started kind of popularizing ketamine for mainstream recreational use, because previously it hadn't been like super on the map, but it was, you know, 60s and 70s and everything was flying. And then there was John Lilly, and some of you who are familiar with John Lilly might be going, oh my God, behind the scenes. John, you can see the look on his face. He's like, I know what I did. John Lilly would do ketamine and swim with dolphins to try and communicate with them telepathically. And if I remember correctly, his assistant was actually slammed for jerking off the dolphins to assist with the procedures because they were like restless. If someone can confirm that, that'd be great. I definitely know that there was some ketamine assistant lady that jerked off dolphins and it was a scandal, but I'm fairly positive that, like, what other dolphin ketamine person is there other than John Lilly? So that would make sense to me. The dolphin ended up, oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, anyway, that was a real thing. And then there were stories like Journeys into the Bright World, which was just like recounts of people, like I think it was a couple that wrote this, doing ketamine together. And so this was like a wide kind of like literary popularization of ketamine, which was an interesting way for this drug to kind of like move into the market. I cannot get over the expression on John Lilly's face here as he's like, yes, I talked to dolphins. And if I remember correctly, he actually stated that dolphins had this like miraculous ability to store memories in or to store information using their sonar. Is it sonar that they use? I think it's sonar. And they would like and whatever it would hit like an object, and he would, I think it was this guy, it might have been someone else, that prophesized that that info would be stored in there. So if another dolphin they would be able to collect it and be like, oh, a message. So that was what he got from doing ketamine around dolphins. I think it was the same guy. It might have been someone else, but I think it was John Lilly. And so just like a myth that really gets my gears doing what gears do, which I believe is turning, is calling ketamine horse tranquilizer. And if you're a person that uses ketamine and you want to call it horse tranquilizer, that's up to you. If you're not, please don't call it horse tranquilizer, because to anyone that actually does use ketamine, they'll be like, seriously? Since ketamine is in the process of getting medicalized so heavily, the stigma is probably going to lift somewhat because now it's medically accessible, which obviously means that it is acceptable. And for a really long time, we've called ketamine horse tranquilizer kind of colloquially, when the fact of the matter is that ketamine is used very predominantly in humans. And if it is used in animals, which it is, it's used in cats largely, which is part of the reason that it's called kitty kitty or K. I mean, not K, but kitty kitty, or sometimes it's called meow or meow meow, but that is like mostly used to refer to methadone, which is a synthetic cathinone, so that can get confusing. Kitty kitty or kitty cat is ketamine. Meow meow is methadone, but sometimes people call kitty meow because it makes sense. Sorry, drug vernacular wouldn't have to be this way if it were all legal. Just saying. I personally just think that this is a really easy way of degrading the people that use ketamine, because especially if someone doesn't know shit about drugs and they say that person's snorting horse tranquilizer in the bathroom, not only is that just like not really what it's mainly used for, but it's also just like an immediate way of being like, that person is a fucking idiot. And it's just really easy to demean people that way. Oh, I had a really important point that I was going to make and I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, my point is that there are so many other drugs that are used to sedate larger animals like horses, like opioids, for instance, but we don't call opioids horse tranquilizers. There's a reason for it. Think about it. Now, also in terms of this thought that like ketamine and other dissociatives like PCP cause brain damage from casual use, there's this concept called Olney's lesions, which is this thing that has been popularized as this guy, Frank Olney, I believe, who was like, oh, look, there are lesions in the brains of these small rodents and monkeys, I think too. But that's never been replicated in humans. So Olney's lesions have not been found in humans. So there's no evidence at all right now showing that there are lesions in the brain from using dissociatives. This is a really common method of demonizing dissociatives as well, even though there's like no actual evidence to back it up. I knew of a lab tech who had a 500G bottle. Wow. Damn. So some adulterants for ketamine. MXE, some of you that are disso fans in here, dissociative fans, might be like, oh, MXE, holy grail, where is it gone? And the answer is it's gone off the market forever. Yep, there it is, MXE, my sweet prince. Yeah. It's like not, well, it's not entirely gone, but it used to be really prevalent in the market between probably 2014 and 2017, I would say. It was actually pretty common to be sold MXE as ketamine in like LA, I know for sure at least. And then in like 2017 or 2018, it just like largely dried up on the market and is now considered to be something that's very difficult to acquire. Now, MXE acts on serotonin. in a more pronounced way than ketamine does. And it was designed to evade the potential liver toxicity of ketamine and other similar dissociatives. And it's stronger. So people would sometimes do a bump thinking that it was ketamine and it was MXC, and they would get way higher than anticipated for a longer period of time. Currently, 2-FDCK is, I would say, one of the more prevalent dissociatives, or the more prevalent analogs on the market that is used as an adulterant. It lasts way longer than ketamine, though. It has significant after effects, excuse me, and is dosed approximately the same way. So this is a very easy thing to kind of sneak in there because it does pretty closely emulate the ketamine experience, but is considered to be like a little bit colder and less psychedelic, I would say, than ketamine is. DCK lasts significantly longer. DCK, this stands for 2-fluorodischloroketamine is 2-FDCK, and DCK is deschloroketamine. And this lasts about 4 to 6 hours instead of only like an hour for ketamine. And the thing about DCK is that its dose is significantly lower. Like a standard dose of K is between probably 30 and 70 milligrams, which is a big range, but to each their own. Whereas DCK is about 20 to 30 milligrams. So if you do a fat bump of what you think is ketamine and you get really, really, really high for a long time, then there's a possibility that it's DCK. And also one of the issues with DCK is that there's a possibility of it having these antibacterial properties that could cause issues for your immune system through time. We have no idea at this point if that's the case. And then there are also a ton of novel dissociatives. They're just like easier to make and import than ketamine. Ketamine's controlled. Novel dissociatives are not controlled. It makes sense. So many of these would include analogs of PCP, like 3-MeO PCP, etc. And usually PCP and its analogs are going to be more stimulating and less sedating than something like ketamine or 2-FDCK or DCK. It's considered to be harder to hole or K-hole on 2-FDCK, for instance, than ketamine or MXE, because it is, I have no explanation for it, but that's the case. So, ketamine has like probably arguably the most psychedelic effects of these, I would say. I'm reading this chat real quick. So much enthusiasm about dissociatives. Right. So that's general ketamine information, and we'll come back to the current antidepressant effect studies of ketamine and other comparable things. I'll bring something up at the end. Don't let me forget to mention bladder toxicity prevention supplements. Don't let me forget that before the end of this lecture, please. Because I'm late as always. So let's move on to nitrous. So a standard dose of nitrous is 8 grams is a ridiculous way of measuring nitrous because it's just a charger. Like nitrous either comes in a charger or a tank. The chargers look like little weird bullet things that contain compressed gas. The tank looks like a tank of nitrous. It's like an oxygen tank, but it contains nitrous. Usually referred to as like NOS or Whippets. Whippet is actually a brand name, and there are many different kinds of nitrous oxide chargers that you can buy at sex shops and head shops and smoke shops. And those different brands of nitrous have different qualities. So usually if you're buying them from one of those sources, the best you're going to get is food grade nitrous. Ideally, you would want medical grade nitrous. And part of the reason for this is that, you can buy it online too. Part of the reason for this is that in order to pack nitrous oxide, yes, thank you for showing a charger. In order to pack nitrous oxide chargers, you need to lubricate the charger and inflate it basically with nitrous, which means that there are industrial lubricants. I'm sure that some of you have seen in the DrugsCo Discord my warning of please scrape out the inside of your rooster. And I told you guys to last time, if you haven't already do that, you should do it. If you don't know what a rooster is and you think I'm referring to cock-a-doodle-doo, then I will inform you in just a second. In different environments, nitrous is known as different things. Like at Burning Man, for instance, it's known as hippie crack or robot poop because people end up doing so much of it that you just have this like bin of non-recyclable steel because it's almost impossible to recycle the chargers. So that is good to keep in mind that nitrous is an extremely wasteful drug, to be honest. Like you make so much literal garbage when you do it, and nitrous oxide is a major greenhouse gas. So the greenhouse gas thing, like there is no ethical consumption under capitalism and whatever. So you're probably not going to ruin our already doomed planet by doing nitrous, but the having like a barrel of empty whippets it feels bad, man. Like it really feels bad. Like your waste is right there. Yeah, it's also laughing gas. That's what it was initially. We'll go over the history of it too. The cloth filter. Yes, I'll talk about the cloth filter. Are even tanks bad for the environment? They're way less bad, I would say, but I don't actually know because you still no, I would say that they're probably way less bad because you can recycle the tank. Like the tank can be reused. The chargers, if you just put them in regular recycling, they're not recyclable. However, recycling is a lie in the United States right now anyway. Yeah, tanks are definitely more environmentally responsible for sure than chargers, but they're very difficult to get. You need to like have a license to get a tank of nitrous for some reason. And then in terms of the chargers being recyclable, you can turn them into industrial recycling centers, but it's a specific kind of steel, I believe. And you have to be like particular with where you bring them to. What I'm saying is that most people just try and dump them in the regular recycling, and that doesn't work. So unless you're like really bringing them to the right place and putting in effort to do so, it's a massive waste. Sure, the food grade chargers come with industrial lubricant. Yes, I am. I can show you a picture of what I scraped out of one last weekend. License is needed because of the Department of Transportation. That's good to know. Wow, lots to say about nitrous. So there are a couple ways that you can do it. The most common form is going to be in these chargers, right? They look like this. They often come in, this is ISI, it's a particular brand. It's a very popular brand. The other brands are things like Ultra Pure Whip and XXX and stuff like that. Each brand has a different reputation for how pure it is, how good quality it is. ISI and Ultra Pure Whip and Whip It are probably the most popular out of all of those. Dental nitrous. Yeah, I mean, you can use dental nitrous. And no, the license is not needed because of Department of Transportation. You're thinking of a different kind of nitrous for cars. In fact, this image that I have right here is inaccurate. This is nitrous for your vehicle. That is a different kind of nitrous than medical grade nitrous. If you do auto grade nitrous, you are going to have a rough time probably, or maybe not actually, but it's dirty as fuck. Do not buy auto grade nitrous. We'll go over that in a second. Because auto grade nitrous is used to turbocharge your car. So usually when you're using these chargers, the easiest and cheapest way of doing it is with these little handheld crackers. You stick this thing inside of it, you twist it until it goes because it's puncturing the top of this to let all the gas out, and you release it into a balloon on this end, which fills up automatically with gas. But these handheld crackers suck.